Hello, bonjour from France. Um, I have no idea what time it was, so I raced home to get on my yoga mat and start class, and I realized I'm an hour early. Better than an hour late, I guess. So I'm going to take this opportunity to actually do a little tutorial of downward facing dog because it's something that we do a lot, and it's also something that I often will call for a modification for that. And I want you to know what your options are. You do not always have to go into a full standing downward facing dog. You can do it from your knees, and of course there's always the option to take rest to come into child's pose. So I'm just going to adjust my camera just a little bit here, and we will get started. Okay, so most of the time when we're doing downward dog, we're usually coming there from a flow. So let's just pretend that that's what we're doing and break it down step by step for a second. So you're always going to start at the top of your mat and your abdomen is engaged. Your bum is slightly squeezed in. Your shoulders are down away from your ears and your arms can just relax at your sides. On an inhale, sweep your arms up. If you like, you can gaze up towards your fingers, but that's just an option. You do not have to do that. You definitely do not have to do a back bend. Lots of people do, but it's not called for. And you can leave your fingers slightly forward. Your arms do not have to come straight up overhead. So leaving the hands slightly forward, maybe gazing upward. Exhale, gentle bend of the knees, coming all the way down. Hands come onto the shins. I bring my hands to the floor, but it's perfectly fine. In fact, most people do it this way, to bring the hands to the shins. Inhale into our flow. We're going to come to the halfway up position. So your back should be nice and flat, like a table. Like if I come by and put a little cafe on there, that it's gonna stay. On an exhale, fold down. This time we're going to bring the hands to the ground. So make sure that you bend those knees, and then we're going to step all the way to the back of the mat and lower onto the knees, untuck the toes. So you're coming into a plank position. You can take an inhale here to prepare. On your exhale, squeeze your elbows in toward your torso and lower down as slowly as you can. Lots of control. So you'll be coming all the way down onto your stomach and your forehead is down. Hands remain under your shoulders. On an inhale, we're coming into cobra. So I want you to raise the chest and then the neck. And then finally at the top, the head comes up. Exhale, you're going to bring yourself down in the opposite order. So chest, neck, and finally head comes down. Turn the toes under. Push back to your push-up plank position. And from here, you have two options. So for the modified downward facing dog, you can leave your toes curled under and move your hips back so they're above your knees, and then open your chest toward the ground. This is the modified position. Okay, no matter which type of downward facing dog you are doing, it is all in your hands. The base of each one of your fingers is your main pressure point. So you're going to be using that to press into the mat to really produce strength. You can also leave a little bit of a bend in your fingers so that your fingers are sort of gripping onto the mat. You can have them splayed quite flat, but I tend to leave mine just a little bit bent so I can do a little bit of gripping. That becomes more important when you're starting to do arm balances and stuff like that, if that's ever part of your practice. But the main thing to remember is pressure on the base of each one of your fingers, these nice fatty pads here. Wrists are strong. The harder you push down into the pads of your fingers, the less tension you're going to have in your wrists. You want to also have strength in the arms and shoulders. There's a lot going on in the arms in downward facing dog. So no matter which version you're choosing, I want those hands really pressing into the mat actively, and then you can open your heart in the direction of the floor. So this is my kneeling downward facing dog. So my hips are over my knees, my chest is opening toward the ground, my hands are powerful. I'm really pushing down into the mat with the base of each of those fingers. My head and neck can relax. And then I breathe. So if I wanted to take this into a downward facing dog, let's go back to our plank push-up position. So we just came up from Cobra. We're back in our plank push-up. I'm just going to move on my mat a little bit. I ventured off the end of my mat there. So I'm coming back to plank push-up. From there, just like always, you turn your toes under, pick your hips up, move them back, and you're going to bring your feet under you. So you don't want your feet too far forward and you don't want them too far back. It's always a gentle balance, finding the place for you. So for most of us, especially the first downward facing dog, the hamstrings are going to be quite stiff, so you want to leave lots of room, leave lots of bend rather in the legs. My arms are really strong, so I'm really pushing down with the base of each one of those fingers, and I'm really using the muscles of my upper arms and my shoulders as well. I'm kind of rotating my forearms down. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's how the engagement works. Good. So let's say this is my first downward facing dog of the day, and I want to pedal my legs out so I can straighten one leg while I deeply bend the other. And just go back and forth. Keeping my breath moving here. This really helps just welcome you into downward facing dog. If you're like me and you have neuropathy, the first couple moves here kind of feel a little bit like lightning. I hope none of you have that. It's very uncomfortable. But once I've pedaled it out a bit, then I'm okay. So I'm not going to worry about my heels touching the floor ever. Some of us it might happen, some of us it might not. I'm going to leave gentle bend in my knees, and I'm keeping my arms really strong. My arms are starting to get tired because I've been here for a while. So if we're coming through on our flow, you either come off of your knees or you just walk your feet to the top of the mat, bring the hands to the shins. Inhale, come halfway up. Exhale, forward fold. And then inhale, rolling all the way up to stand. Again, arms overhead, hands can come to heart center. So let's go through that one more time. Inhale, reaching overhead. Exhale, forward fold, gentle bend in the knees. Inhale, come halfway up. Exhale, hands come down. Step to the back of the mat. Lower onto the knees, untuck the toes. Getting ready for our lowering here. So inhale. On your exhale, squeeze those elbows in toward your torso. Lower yourself down gently with control. Forehead comes down. Inhale, head, neck, and chest up. And then chest, neck, and head down. Turning the toes under. Pushing back up to plank, and then your choice. Kneeling downward facing dog or standing downward facing dog. Choosing the one that works for you. In either case, you're really opening your chest toward the ground and really active fingers. Strong arms here. Stay for a couple breaths. Now, let's say I've been doing this a while and I'm getting tired and my body is calling for rest. What I'm going to do, bend the knees. I'm going to bring the knees out roughly mat width, untuck the toes, and I'm going to bring my hips back on my heels and my forehead down to the ground to come into child's pose. You are welcome to come into child's pose at any time during your practice. you feel your breath slipping away from you, things just aren't jiving, you need to slow down, you come here. When you're here, you can have your arms stretched out. You could walk them over to the sides. I really like that, feels really good. Or you could just keep them by you or even back by your heels. Totally up to you. When you're feeling ready, strong hands, and then you come up on your knees and you decide which version of downward facing dog you are doing. Big breath. And let's finish our flow. So walk it to the top of the mat. Folding forward, hands to shins. Inhale, coming halfway up. Exhale, and then rolling all the way up to stand. Hands come to heart center. And that's it. That's your tutorial. So feel free to rewind, replay this. Try it out on your own. Get on your mat, play around with downward facing dog, how the foot positioning works for you, how hand positioning works for you, and just being aware that it's a bit of an endurance exercise, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. I know it's daunting at first, but I just promise you that if you do it more often, you will build the muscle memory and it'll get easier. And eventually it actually might come to feel like a restful pose for you. But don't worry if it doesn't ever. That's okay too. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to end the tutorial and get ready for our class. So I hope to see you shortly.